To me, these transformations you're talking about talk about a more mature and more responsible society. So we are caring more about some things that perhaps in the past we were not caring so much about. And I think this is in general positive. This is a sign that our society is growing or maturing. And it requires from us, individuals and companies and leaders, a lot more of responsibility. And therefore, more work, more serious work. I would say that it's a bit of both. I think we have to be smart and to try to see how we turn the threats or the challenges into opportunities. If we talk about our industry, cement industry, for example, we could see challenges because we are a very intensive consumer of energy and natural resources. But then at the same time, considering that, for example, waste management is an issue, especially in big cities, and we can use waste, we can treat waste to be fed into our kilns, taking advantage of the calorific energy and also of the ashes that basically contain the basic elements that we use to produce clinker, which is silicium, calcium, iron, aluminium. Then for us this is an opportunity, and basically we are working on that. Yeah, so there's a bit of both, but I think we have to be proactive and smart to try to turn these these challenges into opportunities. Maturity. As I said, we have to mature. I mean, the society is evolving, the society is maturing. I think we are improving as a society in many aspects, and this requires more responsibility. This requires more mature citizens, individuals and corporate citizens. So I would say these challenges are a symptom that we are growing. It's like when you're a child and you become a teenager, and all of a sudden your nice world transforms into, again, threats, but sometimes very positive things. And as you grow, as you mature, then you go through this transformation process. So for society, I think it's similar. So it's about maturing. If we look at our own industry and our main activity, which is cement production, as I mentioned before, we are intensive consumers of energy and natural resources. And the challenge for us, or the risk for us, is that we need to adapt perhaps more quickly than what we have been doing so far. And this requires adopting new technologies. This requires investing. This requires investigation. This requires cooperation with other communities or authorities. And this takes time, this takes resources. So the challenge for us is to do these things quick enough or fast enough to be ready. And again, the opportunities is we identify that in our industry can actually do very positive things for managing other environmental problems. As I mentioned, the opportunity of using waste. We can also take our waste heat, and with that we can produce energy. We can produce materials that over the life cycle of these materials help reduce the CO2 footprint for the society. And I think these are the opportunities we have. Sustainable development is a very basic and simple concept, very easy to understand. It's about satisfying our current developmental needs as a society without putting at risk the possibility of future generations of satisfying their needs. So basically today We want to live in a better world, more comfortable. We want to have better things, better quality life. We cannot deplete these natural resources and just leave the waste for the future generations. So, I mean, I understand it that way. I think this is the definition. And when I talk about the responsibility, well, it's exactly about that. And companies who are responsible from that point of view of when we talk about social corporate responsibility, there's a lot about that. And our organizations are understanding like that. I think in our company, things are not very different from what happens in any other big companies. Early on in the mid-90s, before LafargeHolsim joined, both Lafarge and Holcim joined the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is an initiative precisely to drive this change in mentality and define clear objectives and actions to make sure that our business are sustainable. So this is part of the evolution. Perhaps this has been the major first step in this direction. Then individually and also as part of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, we have endorsed the agreements of the Kyoto and later on the Paris Protocol, and basically we abide and endorse these commitments, and we incorporate that into our strategies, into our actions, and basically into our plans. So I think this is the way in which we have evolved. I see how our organization takes really seriously these challenges, and this is the most important thing. And if we can do better in this regard in the next 10 years, well, that'll be great. Yeah, I would say that I see a company who has more drive, more energy, more determination, more decisiveness in terms of improving and setting for ourselves more ambitious targets in terms of corporate social responsibility. We have focused on, we have been working on different fronts. One front is by incorporating new technologies that are more efficient and therefore less energy intensive. And another big avenue to reduce the intensity of energy is the replacement of traditional or natural resources by alternative ones. Both for raw materials and for energy, we are looking for means to replace more and more these natural materials. We have set a goal for the year 2030 to reduce by 40% the emissions of CO2 measured by ton of cement we produced, taking as a baseline the emissions in 1990. So far we have achieved close to 20%, so there is another 20% to go in the next 12 years. So this is one of our targets. Another target is to help society to reduce the emission of CO2 in the life cycle of construction materials they use for their housing and infrastructure needs by 10 million tons of CO2 emissions per year. Just to give you an idea, this is more or less what 1 million people emit per year in our normal lives in the developed world. And another target we have set for ourselves is by 2030 to be using about 80 million tons of materials coming from recycling or waste to replace natural resources. In Russia, we are measuring the percentage of thermal energy we are replacing with alternative fuels. And today we are close to 2% only. We are just starting. And our ambition is to be able to achieve in the next 10 years 15% substitution of fuels. As I said, by 2030 we want to help society to reduce by 10 million tons of CO2 emissions. Today what we have in some countries, and we are starting with this in Russia, is insulation materials, which are easier to apply and more durable and more economical than other products that exist today. We are also looking at where cement can play a better role than other materials, precisely in reducing global CO2 emissions. We are working very hard, for example, in road construction, and what we intend to do is we intend to foster the construction of roads with ready mix instead of asphalt. The benefits of this is that yes, in the beginning you use a significant amount of ready mix, but the useful life of a road built with ready mix is minimum 3 times the life cycle of asphalt roads. It helps reduce fuel consumption for the users between 3 and 5%. It basically requires minimum maintenance. So you see, this is an example of how cement applied in different sectors can reduce the consumption of energy. It's a very good question, and I thank you very much for it, because we have to distinguish. What we do is not incineration. What we do is co-processing. What's the difference between incineration and co-processing? We use fuels derived from waste, and we burn them at extremely high temperatures, basically double the temperature of a normal incinerator. So incinerators work at around 700 to 800 Celsius degrees. And in our case, we reach temperatures in the order of 1,500 Celsius degrees. Now, that temperature, you completely destroy any organic elements. And basically what you get is CO2, water, and the rest is incorporated into the product as such. So basically, you don't have any dangerous emissions. Now, to ensure that, anyway, we have sophisticated systems for controlling emissions in a continuous way. So we are continuously monitoring a number of items that we want to control. For example, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur oxides. Yeah, basically that's it. And I tell you, it's extremely low, especially compared with incinerators. Our task is basically to let those people who are concerned about this, to let them know the way we are controlling the risk, the way we are managing this, so they understand that there's no risk. Basically, the main goals are to create a conscience of the convenience of concrete roads, and then to support authorities to make this a reality. And one of the ways of supporting authorities with this is, well, to make sure that in Russia we have a good set of standards for building concrete roads. I think this is the first major step, to make sure that the standards exist. Therefore, the projects can be prescribed according with these standards. I don't think I'm the right person to answer that question. I think you should ask some ministers about that. Well, I mean, you take the case of Belarus, and they have been quite fast in adopting new standards and prescribing the construction of roads with concrete very quickly. And in the last 10 years, they have built an amazing number of kilometers in concrete roads, and they're doing very well. I think if the willingness of making this a reality exists, it's there. I think in 10 to 15 years we will see great progress in this aspect.